here's for writers out there. I did, and not to mention any names, I had a adult ed writing teacher who in front of the class, and she knew what my book was about, said, and you cannot write a novel solely on a protagonist overcoming anxiety. I walked out of the class and I never went back. And I thought, I don't need to listen, even though she was the teacher. So I guess what I'm saying is, yes, you hear about rules. I mean, one of the things I found out, because the book had previously started with the protagonist waking up, is that's too cliche. So yeah, there are some good rules if you want to make your book marketable, but in your heart of hearts, if you want to write something, you don't necessarily listen to one person.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
I'm sure
Yeah.
that's true.
Anyone that has anxiety and likes to read contemporary fiction, yeah, I believe, for me anyway, if I picked up the book and I hadn't been the author, I would have really enjoyed reading it, because there's so many wonderful self-help books that are nonfiction. There we go. And it's, they have done studies, by the way, that when people read fiction books, they go on their journey with the protagonist. And I think there was even a study, I wrote an article a long time ago in Emory University, where they did a study of the brain waves. And when you go on that journey, you become more empathetic and you feel like you've gone on that journey with that protagonist. So I think that if someone is suffering from anxiety, or if you have a loved one or a friend who has it, because I have had people who so kindly, neighbors, friends, like, yeah, I don't really have anxiety, but we'll read your book for you. And they told me, oh my gosh, my stepson or my so-and-so has anxiety, I so get it. So there you go.
Yeah. Oh. And you do speaking events too.
I do. Well, and now no one's going out speaking right now, but I'm hoping to go back to that. So here's the other thing. I'm sure you've heard of the hero's journey, right? And that's the other thing that the book is about. A big part of the hero's journey is our greatest weakness can become our greatest strength, because we work on it. We try to get over it. So I had, like so many people, I had a horrid fear of public speaking, really bad. And I had a speech impediment when I was a kid too. I still sometimes mispronounce words. So, or I can't think of them. Yeah. And so before the book was released, I had hired a publicist, and she said, I may get you on radio or TV. I'm like, oh no. And then I thought, well, wait a second, this isn't going to work out. I just wrote a book about a woman overcoming anxiety, and then I'm not going to want to do these things. So no. So I found a local Toastmasters. And for people who don't know what Toastmasters is, it is a nonprofit group that I think it's become, I think it actually started in California. It has become global. I don't know how many thousands of chapters there are. And it's been going on over 90 years, I believe. And I found a local chapter and started going. And I get teary-eyed because the people were so kind to me. And they were so kind to me. And I made myself go by myself that first night. And they said to me, oh, we are looking forward to seeing you next week. And it was like such a shock.
I saw that one of your Toastmaster events where you were speaking on YouTube.
Yes, yeah. One of our last, we've been doing Zoom now because of course of COVID, but we did venture out with a limited amount of people into one of the local parks. And I did a speech about how the correct way to wear masks and what to look for and how to buy a good mask. And I had to really project because I was wearing a mask while I did it. But yeah, and then there's previous ones where I'm at the Toastmasters before COVID in the group. So that's helpful because then I can throw it on my YouTube channel, which I think I don't know, maybe have 20 something followers. I don't know. I'm not, I'm not a phenomenon at all, but there you go.
It takes time.
It's out. Yeah,
It
it
takes
takes
time.
time.
And you're on Twitter. You have a lot of followers on Twitter.
And Twitter is my favorite social media platform. I went to a writers conference in San Francisco, California, and the social media guys, I wasn't on any social media before that. And they said, if you're going to do anything, get on Twitter, and your assignment is to do it tonight. And I thought,
Yeah.
so I did it. And then I followed a friend that I knew all the way from junior high, who I knew would be on there, and he followed me back, and then I just went from there. And so I really like Twitter because you can connect globally, and it's not about, I mean, some people might want to put on their vacations, particularly people who are, travel channel writers and bloggers and videographers. But, you can read, and for writers who are working by themselves at home, when you're in between writing and you're feeling kind of lonely, it's like, oh gosh, I have this global community of readers and writers and people, and I discovered hashtags like hashtag anxiety. It's like, oh my goodness, so many other people have anxiety. And it was like, if only I had known years and years and years before that. So I really like the connection there.
Oh, that's good. That's good that it's working so well for you.
Yeah, and we connected there, right?
Yeah. We use it a lot. We like Twitter. We use it all kinds of things. But I would agree, it does have the global connection. You can find people everywhere.
It is. It's kind of exciting. I mean, that's the upside of social media.
A lot of writers have a similar probably way of writing as me, where some writers may actually sit down and say, I'm going to write 10 pages today, where they're writing an actual book and a story and not just poetry. And they'll do their 10 pages and move on. But a lot of writers are probably like me, where when something comes to you, you just got to write it down. And I don't care if you're out somewhere, whatever it may be, you got to have a paper and pen on you, no matter where you're at, because if you don't write it as soon as it comes to you, then you may remember part of it and write it down later that day or the next day, and it would sound similar, but there's no possible way it would be as great as it was if you wrote it down right away, because when it starts coming to you, it just comes out. And the best advice I would have is, if you've written something and you feel that your work is complete, you've checked it once, you've checked it twice, you may have even got an editor and edited it, and it's ready to go out, but you still have some doubt in your mind and you're nervous about releasing it, don't wait. Put that book out. Let the readers decide what they think of it. And it doesn't matter if 10 people say they don't like it and 150 say they love it, because if the majority loves it, then what you wrote and your gut feeling, knowing that you needed to get something out to the world, was true. Let it go. Just get it out there.
How did you choose Page Publishing? What was involved with making that decision?
Basically, I seen a commercial, and I've actually never seen the commercial since. I've only seen it like once or twice ever, and it said, if you're an author and you like to submit. So I wrote down the number, and then after I finished typing everything up and stuff like that, I basically contacted them, seen where I could submit my book to, and submitted it.
They seem like a really friendly company. They had a great website.
They did, and they did my cover art, the art department, and they did it perfect, because I told them everything I wanted to a detail. I wanted the old 1800 style desk. I wanted the old candle and the old candle style holder. And I wanted the page with part of the, if you get a chance, which is kind of cool, if you zoom in on my book cover, you'll see the first two lines of that Unforgotten Tale, Black Rose, is scribbled on that page. If from afar, you can't notice it.
Okay.
So they did every detail I asked them perfect. the first try, which is kind of cool.
And it looks like they help you with distribution and things like that too.
They do. They submit it to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, booksamillion.com. I'm basically, like I said, you can go to any website that sells books, no matter what is, even your local one, and you could order my book.
Your first book, your first of anything is, you make mistakes, you learn. It's a very, very high learning curve. So this time I actually had an agency, a communications agency, to do not only the cover, but to do a whole campaign art. The whole campaign has been designed by them, because it's not like one ad hoc post here or there. I have so much to communicate. Like I had mentioned the last time, is that I also shared sketches of the characters with the audience as a run-up to promoting book 2. And I have a very key scene from the first book, which I engaged an artist to draw. She did a beautiful job. She has drawn the Wuxing Garden in Hong Kong, which is obviously a fictional place, but she's drawn what I imagined, and I explained, gave her a brief, and she's drawn it, and it's all out on my social media handles. So as part of this whole creative process, I engaged the same artist to draw a scene from the third book, and I engaged another pair of artists to draw a scene from the second one. So that one's ready. Whole point, the whole thing that I got onto now was, authors helping authors or artists helping artists. So I wanted to involve as many artists in my journey and give them the coverage and, give them the, credit, so that authors can engage with people who can lift their book, because a book usually traditionally is just the cover and that's it. So there's so much that I learned, and there's so much I did by myself. I mean, I did the title reveal, the trailer, the teaser by myself. I designed it by myself. So there's just so much out there for a self-published author like myself to do. If you're going to go through traditional publishing, then obviously you get support from the publisher. The process is obviously much longer and you have less autonomy in the process. But if you want to get your story out there, and if you want to do it by yourself, self-publishing means self everything. And it's a massive project with timelines. And this, I've learned so much, and I've been sharing that on my Twitter and on other platforms, that if authors need to do successful promotion of their book, there's a lot that goes into it. And the more they can do, the more visual they can make it, the more chances they have to stand out, because there are thousands of books being published daily. Obviously, the art part of publishing is important, but I cannot stress enough the importance of an editor, because you're too close to your own work, and maybe a beta reader or proofreader can give you some kind of reflection or perspective, but nothing like an editor to go through your work, to challenge you. There was a gentleman on Twitter who I engaged with, and I beta read his book. His first language is not English, and he's writing, he's translating his current work into English. And it was a very interesting read. And I asked him a few questions. I said, how come you formatted it this way, or how come you don't use quote marks, for example? And he said, oh, we don't use them where we come from. So it was so interesting to know. I thought it was a norm. And I said, but since your concern is the English, because obviously when you translate, you lose meaning, and you if a person doesn't speak native English, they might not be able to do justice to the content. I said, you definitely need not only an editor, but a translator as well. So can't stress it enough, because a lot of people just don't get an editor. They self-edit. Self-editing is very important, but you need a fresh pair of eyes, preferably somebody who's experienced, who can give you that feedback, and who can challenge you, who can ask you the difficult questions.
I'm an indie publisher. I self-published. I did the first time around go out and query and try to get an agent and try to get a publisher. It's quite a daunting task. And when you look at the industry, even when I did it 5 years ago. Even since then, the industry has changed a lot, obviously, even more so now with COVID. But I wouldn't tell people not to do that. I think everybody should have all of those experiences. I think you should put your best work together. I think you should make sure, I'm so highly recommending of editing. I think you should get an editor, hire an editor. If you only have so much money to spend on your book, spend it in that area. Maybe you could trade services with somebody. Maybe you could, there's a lot of choices out there online. You can find someone that maybe you're really good at marketing, and you could do the marketing, and you could find an editor to read your work. I think it's so important. I've never read as much indie work as I have in recent months, and there are so many people that choose to skip that part that could really benefit from it. I see a lot of strange editing. I see a lot of strange fonts. I see a lot of misspellings and basic things, but I see a lot of story structure problems too, where I'm reading the story and I'm like, wait a minute, whose point of view is this? Like, where am I? What's happening? And I think that a lot of that happened when self-publishing first became a thing, 10, 12 years ago, through Amazon. And I think it contributed to a bad reputation of the industry. And I think as writers, if you want to be better, you have to learn to take that critique. I remember my editor telling me when it first came back, your ending is all wrong. You have to change the whole entire thing. And it's devastating to hear that. You're like, oh my goodness. I closed the computer and I went and got a glass of wine, and my husband was like, it was that bad. And I was like, I just can't. Like, it was just, that was my way of dealing with it. But looking back on it now, I chopped the last 2 chapters. I moved them into the second book, and I rewrote from scratch the ending. And when my husband read it, he said, this is the ending it always should have been. This is the ending. It is the correct ending. And that's when I realized she's so right, but she's a professional. This is what she does. This is what you get when you hire someone in this industry. And so I think everything like that is so worth having. So definitely have someone read your work. And I realize editing is not cheap. You're not going to spend a couple $100. You're going to spend a couple $1,000. It's worth it in the end, especially if you're like me. You don't have experience. You've never published anything. You didn't go to school for this. You don't have any friends or people in the industry that you can rely on. It's so worth the pennies to do it. Clip advertising, clip other things that you might be thinking of doing later, and make sure you invest in a professional. And if you can't afford that, make sure someone else reads it. A librarian, a friend, someone who will be honest with you, not your husband, not your best friend who's going to say, this is great, because they don't want to hurt your feelings and they don't know how to critique. I think the worst critique is somebody who says, this book is crap. It's like, okay, thanks. You didn't like it, but that didn't help me. I can't get better with that. You didn't say to me, I was pulled out of the story because of this, or this action scene didn't make sense. It wasn't true to the character, or, those are real critiques you can take and learn from and fix and do something with. So you don't want those critiques. You also don't want no critiques. So it's worth hiring a professional or seeking somebody out that you trust that would give you that feedback, even if it's another writer, but make sure someone sees that book before you publish it. For me, I made a lot of mistakes along the way, which I think has helped me and helped me to be better at it, but that's certainly not the recommended way that I would go about doing it when I'm talking to young writers or to writers who are just coming up. I think if there were one thing, would be worth talking to people about, would be social media. I don't think people are prepared. I definitely wasn't. And most of the authors that I talked to were petrified of Twitter. They didn't want to go out to Twitter, myself included. I remember saying to my husband, because he had gone out to Twitter a little bit before. He doesn't have a big following or anything, but he had an account and he was out there and he was like, this is sort of a big space. I really think you should have an account. And I was like, oh no, Twitter is a horrible place. It's the wild, wild west of social media. Like, people are out there bashing each other. And he's like, not really. He's like, that's over in the political world, which you're not stepping into. He's like, you could just stay away from that. He's like, there's a whole other world out there of different topics. He's like, I think you really need to get out there. And it was the last account that I opened, when I have a website with a blog, I have Instagram, I have a Facebook page. And it was the last thing I went out to, and it's turned out to be the most successful platform for me out of all of them. And I really would recommend people try all of them and figure out which one is the right one for you. I think the author universe out there, especially the indie author groups out there on Twitter, are so supportive. It is such a positive group. It's been such a great experience for me, and I've learned so much and met so many amazing people, some of whom I've had the privilege of interviewing. But I would highly recommend it, and I would make sure that you look into all of that, because the one thing about self-publishing is you put the book out there, it's not over. It's just the beginning. I remember hitting that button and thinking, I'm done. Like, whew, I made it. You know, it was many years to get there, many iterations, lots of heartache along the way, lots of challenges, lots of learning. And I thought, oh, we can go on vacation now. I remember saying to my husband, like, this is great. I'm done. I did it. I hit the button. And then it was like, oh, no, you just began. Now you just began a whole other journey of trying to get out in front of people, of trying to get your work seen. You are one little speck in just a sea of indie authors out there who are producing material, and how you're going to rise above and get in front of people is going to be a real challenge when you're self-published. It can be costly. You can end up in a lot of different spaces. There's a million people out there trying to charge you $10 to do this, $25 to do this. You know, you have to be really careful. You go down the rabbit hole of spending an awful lot of money and not selling any books at all. You can spend a lot of time on social media. You know, I have over 17,000 followers on Twitter, and I'm so grateful for that. I'm so humbled by the experience. I remember when I got 30 and I said to my husband, I have 30 people following me. And my husband was like, 30? You have a 30? And I was like, yeah, a whole 30. And it was like, I'm going to get to 100. And he was like, okay, Jen, like, if whatever you say. And it was this funny thing now, because I'm like, yeah, 17,000. And he's like, it's crazy. That's what it is. And that doesn't translate to sales. I don't have 17,000 books sold out there. So I think you have to understand there are sales, and there are the things that you do to sell the book. And then there's branding, which is putting your name out there and having people get to know you, people get to know who you are and what you're out there, your voice is out there, your brand is out there, whether you have a logo or not. But understanding who you are as an individual and what you're trying to put out there, and whether or not you're supportive, you know, whether or not you're collaborative, you decide that. You know, you go out there and decide what you want to be and who you want to be, but then you have to brand, and those are very different things, and you have to work on both of those things in order to be successful enough for you to keep going. And I think that there are a lot of people who won't take that step. You know, they put it out there and they walk away and they say, well, once I sold to my inner circle, you know, which most people have an inner circle, family, friends, neighbors, people that you know that are going to buy the book, whether they read that genre or not, just to support you. So once you go beyond that circle, a lot of people are like, well, that's it. I didn't sell any other books. And it's like, well, what did you do? Well, I didn't do anything. Well, I don't know how anybody was supposed to find you out in this, you know, 330 million people in the United States alone. Like, how were they supposed to find you against everybody else? So I do think that, you know, look into that, you know, be very realistic with yourself on that. Don't spend money where you don't have to spend money. You know, just be aware, especially if you're going to self-publish your book. It doesn't stop when you hit the button. It doesn't stop when your inner circle finishes, at least if you want to keep going. You know, if that's one story and you wanted to get it out there and you had something to say and you're done now, that's fine. If you're trying to move and make it a career, you know, you have to look at this like it's a business, you know, which I had of a business sense. I've been in business for over 15 years. You don't know until you do it. It really is a very unique thing. There's good things about it, you know, having to do all those steps and wear all those hats, but you're going to be good at some things and you're not going to be good at others. And it's all, as long as you have the right attitude, it's all about learning, making your corrections as you need to, take all the advice you can get. But understand, if you're really trying to make it a career, there's going to be money that you're spending, there's going to be time that you're spending, and it's not over once you hit that publish button.